وأصحابه أجمعين. Today's session is about reciting the Quran correctly. A few purposes or intentions that we should have. One is, or I hope that we can achieve the following few things. Firstly, that we can have a realization, understanding that about the importance of tajweed and where we stand in terms of tajweed. Whether we can work out whether we make common mistakes, etc. First, that's the first thing. Secondly, hopefully during the course of this presentation, you will learn something new, because I've tried to put in the slides things that are basic and also things that are a bit more advanced. So hopefully it's going to suit everyone, inshallah. And thirdly, a few things that we can do going forwards, because obviously it's no point just talking about mistakes without having some sort of remedy for it. So inshallah, without further ado, just a few things that we're going to cover. Start off with the importance of tajweed, definition, the types of mistakes that a person can make when reciting, reasons why people make mistakes, and then we look at a few mistakes or specific mistakes to do with makhraj, pronunciation. Again, it's not going to be an exhaustive list because of the lack of time, and obviously this is something that can take days and years to master. So obviously a person should be going away and then rectifying, making. This is just to give you an idea of the mistakes that a person can make. And then number 6, it says other types of mistakes, like to do with ghunna, to do with mud, lengthening, waqf and ibtida, which is commonly these are common mistakes that people make because it's often overlooked. We'll come on to that when we come on to it, inshallah. And then a few other mistakes, and then finally at the end, how to avoid making mistakes in the future going forward, inshallah. So to do starting off about the importance of tajweed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Muzammil, أو زد عليه ورتل القرآن ترتيلا ورتل القرآن ترتيلا. So that's the part that is important, which is, and recite the Quran with measured recitation. Tartil, with tartil. So tartil has been explained by scholars and by Qurra in different ways. This quote has been attributed to Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu. He says, الترتيل تجويد الحروف ومعرفة الوقوف. So he puts it in a nutshell, which is that tartil means. So he was asked about the meaning of tartil in this ayah. So he said, or it's attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu. He said, tajweedul huruf. It means to pronounce the letters, i.e. correctly, or articulate the letters, and ma'rifatul wuquf, to know about stopping or where to stop. And obviously, if you know where to stop, you need to also know where to start. And when it says to know, it means to practice upon that as well. So that's why we're going to focus on those two areas more specifically in this presentation. So coming on to the definition of tajweed, we hear tajweed being mentioned all the time. So what is it? So this is a specific meaning in terms of qira'ah. Literally, it means tajweed means to improve. But in terms of qira'ah, it means التجويد هو إعطاء كل حرف حقه ومستحقه مخرجا وصفة. Tajweed is to give every letter its rights, حقه, and its dues, mustahaqqahu, in terms of makhraj, articulation, and in terms of characteristics, sifat. So I've got the definition there as well in English as well. So every letter has to be pronounced correctly, i.e. you have to fulfill its rights. So for example, when it says haqq and mustahaq, there's two different aspects. One is those qualities which are permanent to a letter. So for example, ta, the letter ta, it has itbaq. So that means to place the tongue towards the palate, to give it the ta, the effect, the full mouth effect. So that is its haqq. That's an example of a permanent quality which will always remain. Whether you recite it with fatha, dhamma, kasra, it will always have ta, ti, tu. It will always have this quality with it in that letter. So that's why it's known as its rights. And then dues, for example, you've got ra, the letter ra. Sometimes it's recited full mouth when it's got a fatha and a dhamma, and sometimes it's pronounced empty mouth when it's got a kasra, for example. So that's dues. So it depends on the situation. and the circumstance, and other letters you will find similar things. So again, we're just going into the definition briefly, so we can't go through all the examples, but that's just to give you understanding of what this entails. And in makhrajan and sifatin, there's two main aspects of tajweed. One is makhraj, articulation, where the letter comes out from, and then on top of that you have sifat, characteristics that attach to letters that give them their flavor and different ways to pronounce. So both of these are very important, and a person needs to bear both in mind when reciting. So coming on to mistakes, which is obviously the focus of this presentation, the two main types of mistakes a person can make. Al-lahn. Lahn in Arabic means mistake. So you have al-lahn al-jali and al-lahn al-khafi. Al-jali means apparent, obvious, major. Khafi is hidden or minor mistake. So an example of al-jali is, for example, changing the haraka of a letter. We all pray Surah Al-Fatiha. So for example, صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. Instead of that, you say أنعمت عليهم. So you've changed the whole meaning. Number one is to change the haraka to something that is not in the Quran, and secondly, it changes the whole meaning to say that what instead of saying the path that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has bestowed upon on them, i.e. the Anbiya or the believers, we say that I have bestowed. So you're changing the person, the subject of the verb. So that is a major mistake. Another major mistake or example of major mistake is to change a letter or pronounce the letter with a different sifa so that it changes or the makhraj changes altogether. So, for example, instead of yakhshawna kasadaha in the Quran, you say yakshawna, yak with a kaf instead of a kha. And there's so many other examples you can think of where a person, because of lack of practice, person is reciting an incorrect letter. This is al-jali, and this is reciting tajweed with tajweed is fard ayn, meaning every single person must recite with tajweed. To know the rules, that's fard al-kifaya. You know, a person, if a few people of the community know the rules, that suffices for the rest of the community. However, in terms of reciting, a person has to recite with tajweed. And coming on to these mistakes, it's haram to make these types of mistakes, al-jali, because they change the meaning and they also change the revelation, meaning a person has changed what was revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we, you know, in effect, a person is changing because the Quran's come down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Jibreel alayhi salam to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam over the centuries, and it's reached us in a pristine form. To make changes to that is obviously a major sin. And then coming on to the other type, which is minor, it says minor, but it's hidden, meaning it's not as apparent. So, for example, a person doesn't recite ghunna or mudud, the mud, he doesn't lengthen where he should be lengthening, those kind of examples. So these are not as severe. However, there's a difference of opinion as to whether these are constitute a sin. So some say it's haram, some say it's makruh. In any case, the person should be avoiding these as well, because again, it's changing the way in which the Quran has reached us. Okay, so what are these are kind of an exhaustive list, like all reasons I could think of why people make mistakes. So on the left at the top we got speed. So this is a common one, and go to any masjid during Ramadan in Taraweeh and you'll find this issue, which is of speed. So speed causes loads of issues, causes the person who normally recites properly to suddenly start making mistakes because they're eating up letters, they are not pronouncing certain letters correctly, they're stopping wherever, you know, any old place without thinking of the consequences of that. So speed is a major issue, a cause of mistakes. Number two, we've got here imitation, copying. Yeah. So a lot of people, what they do is they go on YouTube and they find a sheikh or a nasheed artist who's suddenly decided to get more followers and starts reciting and hasn't studied tajweed properly. And what happens is a person is making the same mistakes that person is making because that person hasn't learned it properly. So imitate, or sometimes the person doesn't know how to imitate, imitates incorrectly, and picks up all the bad mistakes because no one's perfect. People make mistakes. You listen to the same clip again and again. The person made a mistake in that clip, and you're copying that mistake. So that's another reason why someone can make a mistake. Thirdly, you've got ignorance, which is obviously an issue in any type of science or any type of action. When a person doesn't have the required knowledge, necessary knowledge that he needs to be able to practice upon something, then that is always going to cause an issue. So a person who doesn't know the letter or the rules of tajweed won't know how to pronounce the letters properly, won't know where he's making a mistake, etc. And then connected to that, you've got incorrect knowledge, which is far worse actually, because person who has half-baked knowledge, person who doesn't have the correct knowledge, he's not studied properly, or he's studied himself and he's not studied with a teacher and is misunderstood. So what that can result in is a person misunderstanding, and the problem with that is he'll think that he's praying it correctly, and he won't then seek knowledge to correct that mistake. So, and furthermore, he'll teach others those mistakes as well. So, incorrect knowledge is actually worse than not knowing at all. And then connected to that as well, you've got taught incorrectly, meaning a person who has studied by someone, again by this person here, the one who didn't have enough knowledge, he studied by him, so obviously not going to get the correct knowledge or the full, complete, correct knowledge of tajweed. So a person needs to make sure he's studying by someone who is qualified, someone who knows his tajweed, someone who has ijazah, for example, certification from reliable institutes, etc. And then moving on to the next row, we've got two things which are like work together and are causes of a person not acquiring or not being able to acquire the correct knowledge. And that goes for any science of ilm, or sorry, any science of deen. One is pride, ego, and one is shyness, modesty. Modesty in the sense the person is too shy to approach a teacher, to approach someone to learn, and secondly, or to ask someone. And pride, when a person feels that it's below them to study. Yeah, I don't want to be making mistakes. Someone's going to take mistakes after me. How can that happen? I'm perfect, etc. So that kind of attitude is not going to help. So those two things are something a person should get rid of to be able to excel in this and to avoid making mistakes. And then thirdly, you've got bad habits, or here on the second row, you've got bad habits. So what can happen is sometimes a person can have learned and studied ilm, studied tajweed properly, but over the years, he's not then gone back to a teacher and just carried on reciting. So over the years, bad habits can creep in, and a person can start making mistakes he wasn't making before. So what a person needs to do is go back to a teacher regularly, semi-regularly, and make sure that person is still reciting correctly. And then probably the only one in this whole list which is excusable is the impediment, meaning a person has speech impediment, a person isn't able to recite properly, he can't roll his tongue, for example, he can't recite the ra properly, or other issues a person has, he stutters. So it comes in the hadith, والذي يقرأ القرآن وهو يتتعتع فيه وهو عليه شاق له أجران. The person who recites the Quran but stutters and stammers and struggles and it's difficult for him, then for him, he gets two rewards. So he doesn't just get one reward for each letter, he's getting double the reward for the effort he's making. So a person shouldn't be despondent and give up just because he can't recite. He needs to keep making the effort. And finally, we have language barriers. So most of us, if not all of us, at least here, are from an Asian background or from other backgrounds, non-Arabic backgrounds, which means that we already have a disadvantage in the sense that we haven't studied Arabic, or we don't know Arabic to begin with. So sometimes some of the letters are different, are not in our mother tongues. So therefore we struggle with some of the letters, we struggle with some of the concepts. But then again, I would argue that even in the Arab world, you will find that there's an issue, language barrier, because they speak the colloquial Arabic, which is completely different from the Fusha, the Arabic of the Quran. And you'll find many Arabs that mix up letters as well, like Dad and Dha, very common in Arab world, especially among the youth. So again, it's an issue for them as well. So everyone needs to make an effort. Yeah, no one's got an excuse. So anyway, these are the mistakes that people can. These are the causes of why people make mistakes. All right, moving on to the makhraj mistakes. So this is articulation. Reciting the letter, where the letter emanates from in the mouth or nose, etc. You got certain articulation points. So I'm just going to mention a few brief ones, the common ones. So you see here ta and ta. So I alluded to ta earlier, and you got ta. So if you look on this diagram here, you'll see that the makhraj is actually very close together. So you see here ta and ta. It's where the tongue is touching where the gum meets the upper front two teeth. Yes, if you think about it, when you recite yourself now, ta and ta, you can see that it's connecting to the where the gum and the upper two teeth, the back meet, and this sound comes out. So you got dal as well, ta and ta. Now, the difference between ta and ta is simply that a person is, like I said earlier, is moving the tongue, like this is the tongue, is moving upwards, and the middle part is touching the palate to give the itbaq effect. So that causes the full mouth sound to come out. So now, very common for people to make this mistake where they don't differentiate between these two, and as a result, wherever you come across this letter, you're pronouncing it incorrectly. So a person needs to, again, it's about practice. We'll come on to that towards the end, inshallah. Some more common mistakes. So you've got dal again, which is what we were talking about there, the same makhraj where ta and ta comes out from, which is dal. And then you've got something which dad. Now Arabic is known as lugatul dad, and one of the reasons is because number one is it's probably one of the most difficult letters to pronounce, and secondly, it's probably it's the only letter. Arabic is the only language that has this letter, so that's why it's known as lugatul dad, meaning the language of dad. Arabic is also known as that. But dad has its own makhraj. Yeah, dad, as you can see, is here, nowhere near the dal. And the reason why I put these two together is because some people, what they do is to create the Lord or to pronounce the Lord, all they do is do what you do to ta to get ta. They move the tongue upwards to make it Lord, Lord, Lord. Yeah. So instead of dal, all you're doing is making the dal into a full mouth letter to form the Lord. When in actual fact, Lord is a complete different. It's pronounced from a completely different area, which is the side of the tongue, either right or left. Majority of people recite it from the left side, touching the premolars or the gums on the left hand side to create the sound. So that's why it's completely different. But again, this is too short a time to be able to go through and practice. That's something. It's just for realization for you to take it back home and then make an effort. Bi'idhnillah. And then thirdly, you got these put together. Dha. So again, now these this is someone's got really sharp teeth here, but the front upper two teeth, the bottom part, the tip of the tongue is touching the tip of the tongue touching the bottom of the upper two teeth. Yeah. So dha, if you think about it, if you dha, dhal, and tha, all together, these three letters here, they all come from the same area. Again, dha, what's the difference between dha and dhal is the same as between ta and ta. All you're doing is moving the tongue upwards like this, the upper part, to give it the dha effect. Dha and dhal. Yeah. And the reason why I put zayun there, zai there, is because a lot of people mix those two last ones up. And Surat al-Lazina, for example, instead of Ladina, Dina, it comes from here. Zayun comes from slightly further down. So the tip of the tongue is close to the tip of the lower two teeth to give that Zayun effect. So all these three sounds, Sad, Zai, Sin, the whistle sounds, all Safir letters come from there. So first, some people get these two mixed up as well, which is why I put those that together with the other two. But anyway, the point is, we need to be able to recognize and we need to be able to differentiate between these letters. They're all different makharij, they all have different sifat, they all have different qualities. Okay, moving on to another type of mistake, which is to do with the ghunna. I put this in its own slide because there's a few things that person can get wrong here. So ghunna has its own makhraj. Ghunna comes from the nose, khayshum. Yeah, that's why it's highlighted here. From the nose. So one of the mistakes a person can make is when you have to do ghunna, you're not doing the ghunna from the right place. Meaning, you've got here one of the letters of idgham after nun sakina, you've got waw. So then you have to do in a separate letter word. Sorry, then you have to do ghunna there with idgham. Idgham with ghunna. So how do you pronounce that? Min waliyin. So the way to recognize to know whether you are pronouncing ghunna correctly is if you pinch your nostril here, you'll know if the sound is affected, then you know it's coming from the nose. But if it's not affected, that means you're not pronouncing it from the nose. See, I'm pinching my nostril here. The sound is not affected, which is because a person is just using his lips to make that sound. Instead of the it has to come from the nose. So that's an example. And similarly with man ya'mal again, man ya'mal is coming from the nose. It has to come from the nose. That's a ghunna. Okay. While we're on this topic, there's another mistake that people make here. It's not ghunna related, but it's to do with the letter pronunciation. So some people, what they do is when waw comes with mushaddada, waw with tashdid, they pronounce it for some reason as a V. So mivvaliyin, aduvun, instead of as a waw. Yeah, there's no V sound in Arabic. No V in English. Have V, the, in Urdu as well. Other languages have V, but not in Arabic. And similarly, with the ya as well, sometimes some people put too much emphasis on the ya, and it becomes a, because it's from the same makhraj, middle of the tongue, it makes it into a jim. So mayyamal, or sheen even. Mayyamal, mayyamal, too much emphasis on the ya. So mayyamal. Anyway, that's a separate pronunciation issue. And secondly, we've got exaggeration. So this is what you'll find with a lot of so-called YouTube reciters, some of them who on the microphones, and then do exaggerate the beyond the limit set in tajweed. So we'll have, for example, inna is only 2 harakat. The length should only be inna. That's it, done. But this is inna alladhina. Too much lengthening there in relation to all the other letters. It needs to be just double the harakah of the other letters. So inna, e, that's 1 harakah. The noon the ghunna should be 2 harakat. Yeah, so a person, if he extends beyond that, that means he's doing it for too long. Again, that's exaggeration. That's incorrect. That's a mistake. And third one here, example, is a subtle one here. But this is the waw madda there after the noon. So mu'minun, mu'minun. Some people, what they do is mu'minun, mu'minun into the nose. But again, the waw is, the makhraj is hawa. Yeah, it's from the airways. It's not from the nose. So when you say mu'minun from the nose, it's incorrect. It's mu'minun without putting it into the nose. But again, this requires a bit of practice, and a person needs to go to a teacher to be able to rectify this if he has this, if he pronounces this incorrectly. So moving on to the mudud mistakes. So mudud, lengthening. Yeah, so harful mad. So you have a letter followed by alif, fatha followed by a letter with a fatha followed by alif, a, for example, or a waw with a dhamma, a letter with a dhamma followed by a waw sakina, u, and then you've got a letter with a kasra followed by ya, e. So all those are huruf of mad, and then after that you've got certain rules. If you've got certain letters after that, then you can lengthen it even further. But the common mistake is people lengthening these incorrectly. So for example, you've got, everyone recites Surah Al-Fatiha ra'diyan wala dallin, 6 harakat. Yeah, the lengthening of the alif mad after dad, because it's got a sakin letter. The lam has a sakin immediately after the alif. So you've got to stretch it. It's mad lazim. So there's the longest mad you can get. So that needs to be lengthened. Some people shorten it. Wala dallin. That's incorrect. For example, if you do it for too short. And then also some of the Qur'an they mention, if you do it for too long, some people lengthen it for too long, which is beyond the 6 harakat. That's incorrect as well. And then the mad al-tabi'i, the natural mad, is just alif, 2 harakat. Yeah, so Musa, you got 2 there. Musa, yeah, got 1 there and another 1 there. Now to say Musa, it's wrong. A common mistake is when people stop on the last word has just 1 alif. Yeah, Musa, that alif maqsura there is just 1 alif. The kharazab, as we call it, Musa. So Suhuf Ibrahim wa Musa. Some people just lengthen it for no reason. There's no reason to lengthen that mud there. It's just the same length as Musa. That's it, finished. Yeah, so if you lengthen it beyond that, that's incorrect. And then you got this other example, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So we all recite this, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Some people lengthen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Ar-Rahman. Why are you stretching the meme there? There's no need for it to be stretched. It's just 1 alif, ma, that's it. 2 harakat, that's it. So again, that's a mistake. And again, some people imitate other qurra or reciters who make that mistake, and because of that, they also recite it in that way without actually learning the rules. Moving on, inconsistent lengths for some muds. So what some people do is the same mud that comes up. Again, the example was there where you got the same mud, but you're lengthening one, you're not lengthening the other one, or you're having you're lengthening it for 3 harakat in one case, and then 4 in another case, or 2 in one case and 3 in like al-munfasil, for example, you're stretching it ya ayyuhalladhina amanu one time, and another ayah you pay ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, for example. That's incorrect. You have to be consistent. And some ulama say either in the rak'ah, in the same rak'ah you recite consistently, or in the same surah you recite. Uh, Again, you need to know what you're doing. Basically, you need to know and need to be consistent with the lengths of the mudud. And following on from that, you also there's another rule, which is that you've got flexibility in some of the mudud. So, for example, al-mad al-muttasil and mad al-munfasil. Again, I'm going to rush through these, although there's some terminology there. But basically, al-mad al-muttasil, when you have harf al-mad and you have the hamza in the same word immediately after it, and then if it's on the next in the next word, then it's al-mad al-munfasil. So al-mad al-munfasil, the harakat are between 2 and 5, yeah, 2 and 5 length. Whereas for al-mad al-muttasil, which is where the hamza is in the same word, like yasha, the example is there. You got alif mad and you got hamza straight after it. So that's the al-mad al-muttasil. For that, you've got between 4 and 6. So now, if someone were to recite in the same ayah, for example, yeah, example, وَجَاءُوا أَبَاهُمْ. Yeah, you've got both examples there. وَجَاءُوا, جَاءُوا is mad muttasil, and أَبَاهُم, because you've got hamza in the next letter, next word, sorry. That's the mad muttasil. So you say if you lengthen the ja'u, or sorry, the second mud was longer than the first mud, even though it's weaker, the munfasil is supposed to be weaker than muttasil. If you stretch the second one longer than the first one, then that is incorrect as well. Yeah. So even though you might be within the limits, you can't then lengthen one weaker mud more than a stronger mud. Again, this is, I just want to touch on it briefly due to lack of time. And finally, not applying stress, nabr is called, correctly, results in ibdal. Ibdal means just to transform a letter into another letter. So yasha, you can see yasha there. Yasha. If you stop there, there's glottal stop at the end. Yasha. The hamza has to be pronounced at the end. A lot of people, what they do is yasha. Yeah, there's no ending. Either that or they change it into a ha. Yasha. Yeah, that's incorrect as well. Or if you just carry on yasha, what you've done there is made the hamza into an alif. It's called ibdal. It's other qurra have that, but not in hafs. Yeah, so you can't do that in our recitation, in our qira'ah or riwayah. And similarly with ad-dallin, what some people do is ad-dallin. What was wrong there? The lam wasn't given the stress. There's 2 letters, there's 2 lams there, isn't it? Mushaddada. If lam has a tashdid, what does it mean? It means there's 2 lams. Ad-dallin. So there has to be emphasis on the lam to represent the fact that there's 2 lams there. So that's another common mistake. Okay. The final part now is waqf and ibtida. Again, as I mentioned, this is an area which is not really focused on a lot. Yeah, because a lot of people, because this is dependent on a few things. Number one is knowing the signs. So in the mushaf, every mushaf has signs, alamat of waqf. They tell you, like mim means lazim, stop there. Yeah, lam alif means continue, and there's other things as well. All different rules, and a lot of people, what they do is they discard those alamat at their peril because it affects the meaning. And secondly, the other issue is when you don't know Arabic. Sometimes there are no markers there, but because you don't, like I'll go through a few examples where, because you, for example, you're lengthening something, or you're reciting really slowly, so you have to keep stopping. Then you're stopping in the wrong places without realizing the effect that has. So again, this is important. Waqf and ibtida. Waqf means stop. Ibtida means to then start again. So there's a two different branches, but both are equally important. So the different types of waqf, we can't go through the ones that are okay, tam, kaf, and hasan. They're all different levels, but they're all good, all okay. Qabih is what the fourth one, which is the one that is not good. Qabih literally means ugly, meaning is bad. Yeah, meaning you're not supposed to stop there. So some examples here: stopping at an inappropriate stop. So somewhere where you shouldn't stop at all. Now you can all understand this. La ilaha illallah. What does it mean? There's no one worthy of worship except Allah. If you stop la ilaha, what are you saying there? You're saying there's no one worthy of worship. That's it. You're stopping there. So that, to the listener, it's obviously, it changes the whole meaning. Yeah. So a person needs to be mindful of what he's reciting, where he's stopping. La ilaha, make sure you stop at the end. Illallah, except Allah. Again, similar example. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. If you said وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ, we did not send you except as a mercy to mankind. If you said we did not send you to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we didn't send you, meaning you're not a messenger. So that changes the whole meaning. Again, dangerous meanings here. Another one is one of the Qur'an mentioned this. Tabbat yada Abi Lahab. Yeah, Tabbat yada, may the two hands of Abu Lahab perish. Yeah, so someone stopped at Tabbat yada Abi. May the two hands of my father perish. Yeah. So he's changing the whole meaning there altogether. Again, this is an example. Obviously, more than likely people are not going to stop there, but just to show you that where stopping can have a great impact. Okay, and so that's stopping. Starting at an inappropriate place. So this is ibtida now. So just one example here. يا عبادي الذين آمنوا إن أرضي واسعة فإياي فاعبدون. So إن أرضي واسعة, or my servants who believe, or who have brought faith. إن أرضي واسعة. Indeed, my land is vast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying. So the mutakallim, the speaker, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. فإياي فاعبدون. So worship me alone. فإياي فاعبدون. Now if someone were to just carry on there, إن أرضي واسعة, and stop. Oops. And then فإياي فاعبدون, he's saying worship me. Now it's as though he's changed the speaker from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to himself. فإياي فاعبدون. Obviously it's not intended, but there's that meaning change or potential misunderstanding. Therefore, a person should avoid this. Again, it requires a person knowing Arabic, understanding the basics. And finally, we've got this one other example, which is a very common one. This is Surah Yasin. Everyone, is it? Oh, sorry, it's not. It's in 11th, isn't it? Continuing where one stops is another example of this in Yasin as well. But continuing where one should stop. So here, وَلَا يَحْزُنْكَ قَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا. So let not their speech or their utterance grieve you, O Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, referring to the utterance of the kuffar. Let not what they say grieve you, meaning they're saying all sorts. And then if you were to continue قَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ, it would suggest that you're saying that their speech or their utterance is إِنَّ الْعِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا, that indeed all honor and might belongs to Allah. Yeah, so can you see what you've done there? You've made it into that their utterance is the following statement there, which is obviously not the intended meaning. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna al-izzata lillahi jami'a. It should be separated out completely. That's why there's a meme there. If you look in the Quran, Mus'haf, you'll see it. There's a meme there. Waqf lazim. You have to stop there. So this is an example where people, because they're rushing, especially in Taraweeh, for example, they just carry on here without stopping. So this is what everyone needs to be mindful of. Okay, finally, miscellaneous mistakes. So just a few mistakes that are commonly made, and I just wanted to touch upon just to give you a flavor of the different types of mistakes a person can make. These are new terms for some of you maybe. Ikhtilas. Ikhtilas means to snatch. So ikhtilas in Quranic terms or qira'at terms means to recite a letter, or haraka rather, haraka, like fatha, dhamma, kasra, 2/3. So take 1/3 away. So snatching 1/3 away from that letter and leaving only 2/3 left of that letter. It may seem very subtle, but the qurra, the ones who are very professional or very taught and learned, will be able to recognize this when they listen to a student. So ikhtilas. So this again happens all the time in Taraweeh, yeah, where people are just eating up letters or eating up harakat. So I just give an example there. Ya'idukum. So ya'idukum, 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 ya'idukum. So you're rushing some of the letters there. Ya'idukum. I think you're still pronouncing the letter, but you're pronouncing it not the same length as you pronounce the other letters. Ya'idukum. Yeah, you're rushing the dal and not giving it the same length as the other letters. So that again is an example of ikhtilas, where there's no ikhtilas. There's one example according to some ta'manna in Surah Yusuf, but apart from that, in Hafs there's no other ikhtilas. So doing that is incorrect. Again, yukadhibu bid-din, yukadhib bid-din. You can see how people are rushing it. Yeah, sometimes it might even result in idgham kabir, which is only Imam Susi who does that. Yukadhib bid-din, yukadhib bid-din, because it's printed so fast. Yeah, so that, again, that's wrong. Yukadhibu bid-din. Pray slowly, correctly. Every single harakah has to be given its due length. Moving on to the next one. Again, another common mistake people make when rushing in recitation is to not pause properly. Yeah, not to do waqf where you're supposed to be doing waqf. So an example in Surah Al-Fatiha, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So some people do Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Yeah, what you've done there is you're carrying on, but then you're doing waqf as well at the same time, which is not the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. If you're doing sakt, then you have to pause, or if you're doing waqf, you have to breathe. So in either case, both of those you're not doing, which is incorrect. And in any case, it's not even a place where you have to do where you can do sukt. So that would be incorrect anyway. So the only thing you have to do is either you continue Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, recite the haraka Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki, or if you were to stop Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, pause, breathe Maliki Yawmiddin, like this. Yeah, so that's another common mistake. Imala, yeah, imala is the air sound, a or air. There's different types of imala. Yeah, it's basically between the fatha and the kasra, or between the alif and the ya. So say air. So some people what they do is bihi bih becomes beh, yeah, or like in Urdu we say ghair, yeah. So some people apply the same in Arabic. So ghair al maghdubi instead of ghay instead instead of ay air. Yeah, so that's imala where it shouldn't be. Imala again, there's only one place in the Hafs where there is imala. Bismillahi majreha majreha. That's the only place in the Hafs, in the riwayat of Hafs where there is imala. Apart from that, everywhere else there's only I, u, a, u, etc. There's no air sound or a sound. Moving on to number 4, sakta. Yeah, sakta is a pause when doing ilhar. So sometimes I've noticed this. Sometimes people do min khawf, just to pronounce the kha, the letter kha. What they do is to stop slightly on the min, just to allow them to prepare themselves to articulate the kha. Yeah, again, min khawf, it should be continuous. There should be no pause there. Can't say min khawf. That's incorrect. Okay, and then finally number 5, tasheel. Tasheel is easing sound. So I'll go through the examples so you can understand. Again, well, there's a few examples where in Hafs you can do this. One major one is, or one obvious one, or there's no other option in this one. A'jamiyun, a'jamiyun wa arabi. But apart from that, there's other places where you've got both options. But in general, there's no tasheel on Hamza. Tasheel means to pronounce it with a loose sound. Yeah, in between the it depends on the letter before it, but it's in either in between the hamza and the hamza and ya or wow. Yeah, so example here, mintum. Yeah, so hamza. If you pronounce hamza properly, you say mintum. It should be pronounced the same. But so a lot of people do is mintum, mintum. So can you see the difference? Mintum. The second one is loose. Yeah, it's eased. It's tasheel. Tasheel means to ease the sounds. Mintum. Yeah. Again, happens when you rush. وَإِذْ قَالَ وَإِذْ قَالَ وَإِذْ قَالَ وَإِذْ قَالَ. Yes, what you're doing there is not pronouncing the hamza properly. وَإِذْ قَالَ. Again, وَإِذْ قَالَ وَإِذْ قَالَ. The hamza has to be pronounced properly. Otherwise, you're doing tasheel where there is no tasheel. Okay, on to the last slide now. We reach the end. So how can we avoid mistakes? Yeah, so there's a few simple steps. Number 1 is understand the importance of tajweed. Hopefully, you have to an extent understood the importance, but again, we need to study further. Understand, once you understand and appreciate the importance of tajweed, then you'll make an effort. Yeah, if you don't understand the importance, you'll just ignore it. You won't consider the impact it will have. Yeah, and you will continue to recite the way you've always been reciting, and you'll continue to pray fast, even though you know that praying fast will cause you to make mistakes. Because you don't understand the importance, or because you don't appreciate the importance, you'll carry on praying like this for years on end. So that's the first thing. Appreciate, understand the importance of tajweed. Secondly, study by reliable teachers. Now, this is very important. You have to study by a teacher. If you just study on your own, self-study, you don't achieve the same. You won't be able to pick up on your subtle mistakes, even major mistakes. You won't be able to pick up on. You have to study by, as I mentioned, trustworthy, reliable teachers, teachers who have actually gone through the path and have a chain direct to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember, it's a chain of transmission all the way. We should carry on that chain. Yeah. So the only way to achieve that is through someone who has actually studied officially properly. And I mentioned in there in brackets S, meaning plural, meaning teachers. What happens is a lot of people, what they do is study by one teacher and that's it. Usually ends up being the maktab teacher and that's it, finished. And for the rest of their life, they're reciting in the way he was taught, that the person was taught by their teacher. But if you have multiple teachers, if you look in the practice of the pious predecessors, all of them had multiple teachers, tens, sometimes even up to 100 teachers, different teachers. They would go to each different teacher Because what you will and what you will find out is what you will find is that a different teacher will pick up on different mistakes or have different ways of recitation, and there are certain aspects within tajweed which are mukhtalaf fi, meaning there's difference of opinion. You will find that one teacher will have one opinion, another teacher will have a different opinion. By studying by multiple teachers, you will be in a position, because you have the chain of transmission, to be able to pick one that you feel is appropriate. Yeah, because you've got the chain of transmission, and those are the differences of opinion which are acceptable, by the way, not differences of opinion which are invalid. So again, we should try to study by multiple teachers. We have our own teachers in our makatib and madaris, and within our circles we have our Asian, or from our own circles we have our teachers, but we also have teachers from, for example, Egypt. You can go to Arab world as well, you get a different flavor. So we should try to be flexible, yeah, open-minded, and study by multiple teachers to be able to really become fluent in tajweed. I also had another point which I forgot to put on here, which is learn Arabic. I mentioned waqf is important. The only way to understand or to be able to fully know when to stop and when to start, is by learning Arabic. Unfortunately, I see many huffaz who just stop there and that's it. How can you be a hafiz and then not want to pursue learning Arabic? Yeah, you want to then understand. I've learned all this Quran. How can I understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me? Yeah, I can recite the Quran, but I don't understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling me. So we find many huffaz like this. Huffaz should be at the forefront of wanting to learn Arabic. And again, for everyone else as well, we should all try to learn Arabic. Arabic is the medium through which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to us, is speaking to us. The kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in Arabic. So how can we not want to learn Arabic? Yeah, we've only got this one life to learn, to make the most of it, to prepare for the life hereafter. So let's make an effort to learn Arabic. And finally, practice. Practice, as we know, makes perfect, or very close to perfect. So you have to practice. Yeah. Um, Imam Ibn al-Jazari, rahimahullah, he mentions that the only difference between a person who can recite with tajweed and the person who can't recite with tajweed is that one is exercising his jaws, meaning the person is making effort, he's practicing. All of these reciters who can recite have all been through the same thing. They've all made an effort. They've all practiced. Yeah, the people who haven't made an effort, those are the reason why people make mistakes. So we have to practice. Yeah, and practice again, as I said, you can only practice properly once you have studied properly. So you need to do it has to work in tandem. Yeah, the two things have to work together. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our sitting here and to make it a means of our rectification. One thing I wanted to mention as well, that the last time I did this talk, or similar to this anyway, was in 2016 in this very masjid in Ramadan. How many years has it been? 16. And maybe a few people who were there then are still here now. They can ask themselves as well, that have I improved at all since then? Yeah, so that's been, how many years has it been? 7 years. Yeah, so 7 years it's been since then. So imagine if you just have a little bit of improvement every year, how much more you can achieve in the next 5 or 7 years. So wabillahi tawfiq. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept our sitting and to make it a means of our rectification, and may He accept our recitation throughout the whole month, and may He give us the opportunity, tawfiq, to continue to recite, but to recite correctly and to study by reliable ulama. Wabillahi tawfiq wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.